Welcome back to Spiro Avenue. 2 shows in a row, rare for us. Very difficult feat with 3 kids, a full-time job. I'm a full-time grad student, but just because I love you so much and because there's so much going on, we're doing it. And I'll tell you, I'm not going to lie. I don't like to lie to my audience. I like to be frank. The biggest reason we have 2 shows back-to-back is because I finally got both guests whom I've been chasing for a long time to say yes. And you are not going to play around with a yes. It's like Billy Bean and Moneyball. When you get the answer you want, you hang up. Yesterday, we had Max Boltman on. Great show, talking wings. Today, a guy that we have chased for many, many years. A guy who has ignored me ad nauseum, who has broken my heart again and again. One of the finest journalists in the great state of Michigan, Kyle Meinke, MLive.com. MLive is a great publication covering the Lions. You are the man, and you are especially the man for being here, and welcome to you.
Thank you for thank you for having me on, and I spot no lies in what you just said.
You are fantastic.
It was like it was like a 2-year courtship probably before this happened. It's a busy time on the Lions beat always, and especially these days, I suppose.
Well, I appreciate you blaming it on the busyness of your schedule and not any animosity that you might have. And we've talked about it's been a long rehabilitation process for my reputation in this town because I was told I was a terrible person in my 20s and now in my early 30s trying to be a good guy. And I don't know if Justin Rogers told you that the bar had good whiskey in this basement or what, but the bottom line is you're here and it's a good time to have you.
There may have been some talk of whiskey, which may have been the tipping point. I'm not going to confirm or deny the reports.
Hey,
but.
I'm not above bribery, man. And we poured one out, so we're actually enjoying some Johnny Walker right now.
Prost.
So cheers to you, and cheers to our audience, who is very privileged, by the way, to have Kyle in here at this time, because this is a special treat for us, because the Lions are a national story right now. And typically they're a national story because they're either going 0-16 or because their team is shitting all over their coach on their way out the door. But now they're a national story for a more traditional reason. They're going towards a new regime change, complete overhaul. It's a big story when you're replacing a GM. It's a big story when you're replacing a coach. When you combine the two, it's a huge story. Our focus tonight, we'll talk about the GM, and there's been conversations going on. Our focus tonight's mostly going to be on the organization and their search for a coach, because that's where I think there's just more actionable, discussable material. There's more stuff out there. There's more smoke out there. So I've talked about it openly on this show, Kyle. I'm a gambling guy. I don't hide it. I wouldn't say I'm an addict, but I'm a fun addict of gambling. Even if I'm not betting, I'm just fascinated with odds. So this is what we always come back to, because the market is reflected in the odds in Vegas, Bovada, wherever you look. So we'll pull this up. In terms of the next Lions coach, this is per Bovada. Now, this may have changed a little bit. This was as of yesterday. But we're going to have Ben pull that up and display to everyone that's watching the odds here. And for the audio listeners, I'll read off the top few names. Robert Saleh, minus 200. For those that are not familiar with gambling parlance, that is a prohibitive favorite. And then you go all the way down to Eric Bieniemy, offensive coordinator for the Chiefs, at plus 700. Marvin Lewis tied in second place at plus 700. Darrell Bevel, a vomit-inducing plus 1,500. And then you start to get into the 2000s where you're paying 20 to 1. And you're getting into the long shots, the Arthur Smiths and whatnot. So by definition, by any metric, any gambling perspective whatsoever, Robert Saleh is the prohibitive favorite on paper right now. There's a lot of news about the Jets are interviewing him for the second time today. Do you agree that Saleh should be the prohibitive favorite? Is he the favorite? And should he be the favorite for the Lions?
Well, he checks a lot of boxes, I mean, they're looking for a guy who's going to have – I mean, first of all, he's got a great defense in San Francisco, and the Lions do not. So I think that – is a pretty good starting point. But beyond that, the Lions, what's the profanity?
Or you can say anything.
Okay, they're a clusterfuck, right?
Yes.
And not just on the field, but organizationally, culturally. And I think that's apparent. I don't think we have to spill more ink here talking about Matt Patricia and his failures handling the locker room.
We'll spill a little ink later.
Yeah,
we'll get to
fair
that.
Enough.
Just a little ink.
Fair enough.
Just a little bit.
I think it's no secret that there was problems within the organization and not just between the white lines. And I think when the Lions make this hire, they're going to be looking for a guy who more than anything can coach between the white lines, but they're also looking at the character fit, the culture fit. They're trying to rebuild their culture. It's a problem. It's better now than it was in 2018, and I think that's an important point to make too, but it was still a problem. And not just in the locker room, organizationally, Justin, you have guys pulling in different directions. You had a guy like Bob Quinn. I have respect for Bob Quinn, and I think he did some things well, and I think he did some things terrible. He had some hits, and he had a lot of misses, and that's why it didn't work out. He wasn't a total wreck, but he also did some things I think that were problematic for the franchise. And one was walling off parts of the organization from others. He and it wasn't just him; it was Patricia too. But this regime, they wanted to have the football operations walled off from other parts of the organization, which created the perception of an us versus them mentality within the organization. You've heard already Rod Wood reference that. You've heard Chris Spielman already reference that. So that is just to tell you that this will be an emphasis in the search. It's not coach speak. It's not like they're just filling like press conferences with fluff. They're looking for guys who are character fits, who will be able to build strong character, which has always been important to the Fords, and a unified culture. Robert Saleh, based on everything that's out there, is a guy who fits that bill. Most of the guys on this list are. That's why they're on the list. But I think Robert Saleh, if you listen to the things coming out of San Francisco, why players like playing for him, guys like Richard Sherman coming out and saying he deserves an opportunity because he's a leader of men, things like this. This is music to the Fords' ears. And I think in addition, all of that, of course, being from Dearborn, being able to be a stone's throw away from where he played high school football, that stuff all helps too. It fits into a narrative and it checks boxes again. He's got people, believe me, he's got people in Southeast Michigan who are campaigning for this to happen. I don't know. I don't have any firsthand information on how his interview went. I know there are reports out there that it went well, reports that it didn't go well. I can tell you, Justin, more than anything in this search, you got Rod Wood leading it with Sheila Ford Hamp, Chris Spielman. There's a couple of advisors who are advising the search, informing the search, and that's basically it. It's a tight circle. So I'm pretty cautious of what I take out of what I'm hearing on this guy interviewed well and this guy didn't, because they're getting it probably second or third hand at least. So I don't know how Saleh interviewed. I see the favorite up on the board, and I get it because of all the things we just talked about. The way things are going with him getting a second interview in New York, he's got one with the Eagles, I think, tomorrow. I think the Lions probably go a different direction, but of course he fits all, he checks all the boxes, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if they eventually made the hire, if he was into it.
Yeah. And you nailed it. And I was about to say exactly what you just said, is that, look, we don't have this inside information. We talked a little bit before the show briefly that they have kept this thing a steel trap where nothing is getting out. You referenced in passing the report that the Saleh interview didn't go so well in Detroit, which was an Aaron Wilson coming out of Texas thing. That was disputed by Dave Burkett, a colleague of yours who said that went very well. Who knows? But what we do know for a fact is the interviews that they've confirmed. And Robert Saleh, who is my personal pick, and was the pick, by the way, before everyone else liked him. Just for the record, I liked him before he was
That's
popular.
like the most hipster thing I've ever heard in my whole life. I liked Saleh before it was popular, like Robert Saleh.
I have the ultimate Detroit media hipster in the studio today, so I have to try to hipster your
Not
level.
the first time I've heard that, believe me.
Well, it's all right, but
as I drink your expensive ass whiskey.
Yeah, let's not be mean now, Kyle. So because we'll get into the politics stuff later if you really want. Although it's funny, I've been accused of being an extreme liberal and an extreme conservative, and neither of those are true. And I've been called a MAGA hat wearing Trumper, and I didn't vote for him either time. But there you go. So I digress. But the point is, you named it. He today conducted his second interview with the Jets, and now there's buzz that he's the favorite there. You mentioned the Eagles. So we have one virtual interview with the Jets, and then an in-person interview, a second in-person interview with the Jets, versus the Lions having just the Zoom interview. It's like, Zoom, to me, how serious are you if you've only graduated to that point? I think, in my opinion, and I know you don't have inside information because it seems like nobody does, it seems like he's not their guy. And I wonder where they land if he's not. And that transitions me to a name that we have also heard buzz about, but not negative buzz with the Lions, but positive buzzes in terms of how that interaction went when they interviewed him. Marvin Lewis. And Marvin Lewis is a polarizing figure in a lot of ways. I have seen the gamut of reactions from the fan base. I would say 70% negative, 30% positive, but it does run the gamut. And we'll bring up, Ben, if you can throw up this Jeremy Fowler, guy from ESPN, had a tweet on Marvin Lewis. Thank you for highlighting that, Ben. What a fantastic producer you are.
Look at that.
This is a quote from Jeremy Fowler on January 8th. Quote, Lions came away impressed by Marvin Lewis in his recent interview. He's in play there. So this was the first sort of mention publicly that I'm aware of that Marvin Lewis was like a legitimate candidate. This wasn't them just kicking the tires on a guy who had some modicum of success. I've been back and forth. So initially it seemed like the Marvin Lewis rumor was met with a collective groan. Now, you have a finger on the pulse of the fan base more than I do. We'll talk about all the emails you get a little bit later. But that was my perception. I was initially against it, like most people. My gut initial reaction was, ew, gross, Marvin Lewis. This is a team that has not won a playoff game since I was not in diapers. And he was the ultimate playoff failure. You take a step back. Bengals were terrible before he got there. They were terrible the second he left. He won a tough division multiple times. Do you think he's truly, as Jeremy Fowler says, I know you don't have the inside information, your gut, is he truly in play for the job? And should he be? Do you think he's viable?
Yeah, I do. I think it depends a lot on who they hire as the GM. You know, because they're doing it different this time. They're not hiring a GM and then letting the GM hire the coach as they've done for forever with no success. So I think it makes sense that they would shake up the process and their structure. And more teams are doing what they're trying to do. And with the partnership between the coach and the GM, we'll see how it works out. I've never seen it happen before. Detroit, and you got a first-year owner and a non-football GM making these hires. So there are reasons for skepticism, but I like the approach, I guess. But I think if they hire an inexperienced general manager, say Brad Holmes, who is the lead, apparently the leader now, the favorite. He's got the second interview in Detroit. He's in Detroit right now. He'll be interviewing in the morning with the Lions in person. So I think he has to be considered the leader at this point. Very respected guy from the Rams, college football director, the college football scouting director in LA. He was the guy who picked Aaron Donald. I mean, he led that evaluation and picked Aaron Donald. Jared Goff, a bunch of guys who did a lot of good things who helped that team get to where it is now. But no general manager experience. And if you look at the guys they've interviewed, Justin, it's a litany of former GMs. It's pretty clear to me they want to hire experience, right? And that to me makes sense with a first-year owner, a non-football GM, a Chris Spielman, who I have a lot of respect for, and he has incredible amount of respect around the game. It's hard to find a guy with more respect universally around the sport than Chris Spielman, but he has not been in a front office before. This is his first time actually, having his hands on the levers. So it makes sense to me that they would want some experience. So to me, if they hire, say, Brad Holmes, a first-time GM, I think they will lean on experience in their head coaching hire. That's what I believe. Yeah. And Marvin Lewis, in the search of the guys that they've interviewed and been linked to, has more experience than the rest of the guys combined. And as you said, I mean, the optics of it on the surface level are not good, right? Like this guy who never won a playoff game.
Famously 0-7.
Right. Never won a playoff game for a long-time doormat, coming to a long-time doormat that hasn't won a playoff game since 1991. Like the optics there are not great. But as always, the devil's in the details. Like you got to look at the nuance, and the nuance is that this guy's a pretty damn good coach. Like to go into Cincinnati for as long as he did in a sport where there's more turnover than any other sport, especially in coaching, and to last as long as he did and to win as much as he did. Go try to find a bad quote about the guy from a player. I mean, the players loved him. I've never covered Marvin Lewis, but just from what I've gathered about Marvin Lewis, what players have said, I've talked to a couple of people who covered him in Cincinnati, what they say about him. He reminds me of Jim Caldwell.
The defensive version. I mean, Caldwell's got the offensive background.
Schematically, they're different. Their background and the X's and O's are different. but in the terms of the way they run their organizations they seem striking to me, which is what Caldwell was about anyway. He was an offensive guy, but he turned over the offense to Joe Lombardi and to Jim Bob Cooter. He was more of the CEO type, and to some success, not enough success. We don't have to go down into a Caldwell wormhole, but he got fired and for good reason. But like, obviously what he did with that team was pretty good compared to what was before him and what came after him. Marvin Lewis is the same way, kind of a CEO type who was a player's coach who got players to play well in a city that was a long-time doormat. I think there are reasons to look at Marvin Lewis, and I think if they were to hire him, it would definitely be not a sexy hire, and I think that there would be some backlash in the fan base, and that's something that the Lions would have to sell to the fan base, and that's a negative for some people. And I've seen it on Twitter, and you just alluded to it, right? 70-30 probably against him. I think that feels about right on Marvin Lewis. But the Lions should not be making this hire to win the fucking press conference. Nope. I'm so tired of the argument. I mean, look at Matt Patricia, and I know the hire wasn't universally beloved, but as far as hires go, it's about as universal as it goes in the NFL. He was their plan A. The Lions aren't used to getting their plan A of anything. He was the plan A. He was the Lions plan A. Yeah,
and I didn't know anyone against it,
right?
Including me.
He was the genius rocket science. I mean, we all heard all the stories. He won that press conference right out of the gate. And you had people dressing up as Matt Patricia for Halloween, right? Like we saw little kids everywhere, like all across Southeast Michigan, dressing up in the beard and everything. And he was a historical disaster. The Lions should not be making this hire to win a press conference. If they want to hire Brad Holmes, if they think that guy is the right guy to run this team, and there's a lot of smart people in this league who thinks he's a really smart guy, and they want to compliment him with experience, and they believe that's the right fit. Like, I think they can do better than Marvin Lewis personally. But if that's what they believe, they should do it. And I think that they should not have to worry about winning the initial press conference. I think they should worry about winning some football games. And if they think Marvin Lewis is the way to go, then they should do it.
Yeah, we're totally aligned in terms of winning the press conference. And I don't know how much they value that anyway. I mean, Sheila Ford Hamp, whom I've crushed for this decision to retain Quinn Trisha in the first place, but that was her whole thing. It would be easy. It would be cathartic for the fan base to blow them out. But so I don't think she, for whatever criticism I have of her, and there's a lot, it's been a rough first year. I don't care what anyone says. We'll get to her later. But, I don't think she values too much winning the press conference, which that's a good thing, and that's to her credit.
I agree with everything you just said, Justin. I was one of the 5 people sitting at that table. I was sitting right there. She was sitting right there. And her mother, Martha Ford, was also sitting there. But Sheila did 95% of the talking for ownership, which I think I even wrote at the time, signaled to me we have the successor in play. But I walked away from that meeting impressed too. I didn't agree necessarily with the decision, and of course it ended up being the wrong decision, and you have to hold that against her. But in ownership and decision making, you have to have conviction of belief. And I think that's something the Lions have lacked in their leadership structure for a long time. Someone willing to make unpopular decisions, to cut bait or whatever, to make unpopular decisions. And she was willing to do it because she believed it was right. It didn't work out. Of course, the goal is to make better decisions going forward. But I walked away from that meeting impressed by Sheila Ford Hamp, and that was a big reason why this ability to say this will be unpopular, but it's what I think is right. I just think that's an important trait in leaders. And if you talk to Chris Spielman, why he finally decided after getting a bunch of opportunities to leave the broadcast booth, why he did it now. If you talk to him about that, he says it's because of Sheila Ford Hamp. Ultimately, he was in a hotel room in Cincinnati of all places, and he had a second call with her, and he's like, it was like a locker room speech. I was ready to run through the wall for her because of her passion for wanting to do this and stuff. I don't know. We'll see how it works. It's very early in her ownership, and I understand that she has the last name Ford, so people are skeptical. I totally get that. The skeptical is warranted. The Ford family has been an abomination.
We're on try 3 for the record. Yeah. This is the 3rd try. So we're basically, if this doesn't work out, we're into the family pet territory. And I'm glad that you said basically something that I have been saying for months. Now, that was a December of 2019 press conference that you're alluding to, where it was like you and 4 people, basically. It was a very limited clientele at that one. But Sheila Fordham didn't officially take over until like 7 or 8 months later. And I had people pushing back on Twitter. Justin Rogers, who I love, colleague years, he's best. But even he was saying, Sheila Fordham took over. She didn't even take over till July. It's like, come on, man. You were there. She said this in December. She was the one doing all the talking. You can't absolve her of the decision. That was a huge whiff that she had, and that's on her ledger. I don't care if the paperwork that they filed with their attorney said that it was her decision 7 months later going forward. That was her. That was not Martha. If that was Martha's decision, Martha would have done more than sit there with her giant sunglasses and nod her head for the whole half an hour. That was a Sheila Fordham decision. It was a whiff. But I do agree with you on the mentality being the right mentality of I don't care what people think. I'll wrap with Marvin Lewis with this regard. You said you don't think he's the best fit. I'm not so sure he is either. I fluctuated on this. But the one thing I'll say about Marvin Lewis in his defense, as a proponent of the hiring, however you want to phrase it, it won't be a bad hire. You hire Marvin Lewis, it's not going to go poorly. I feel extremely confident in saying that if Marvin Lewis is hired tomorrow, this team, maybe not next year, but within 2-3 years at the most, they'll be back into the Jim Caldwell 9 wins, 10 wins, getting into the playoffs. Maybe they're competitive in that wild card round. Maybe they're not. I don't see Marvin Lewis being a 4-12 type coach here. He's just too good of a coach. I mean, for whatever you think of him, I actually think it would be a solid hire. I want Saleh. Marvin Lewis wouldn't be my choice, but my initial gut reaction was absolutely not. Now I've reformed a little bit where I would say it's not my pick, but I don't think it's egregious. I would get what they're doing. And that brings me to my next point. Whomever they hire, and Marvin Lewis would be compatible with this idea, they have, in my opinion, an obligation, a mandate to look at this hire, and really for the GM too, but more so the coach. It's the more hands-on role of the two, to have a reparative mindset with what they're doing. They have to, I hate the term players coach, it's overused, but we'll make an exception. They have to go into a little bit more of the players coach side of things because they have done not irreparable damage, but significant damage to the reputation around the league. The players were just stomping Patricia's corpse into the earth's core. And we've talked about that again and again. They were taking victory laps when Quinn was fired and Patricia was fired. And this brings me, we'll just throw one example. I like people being in studio and then quoting them during the show. So, this was just one example. This is you just really quoting somebody else. But Kyle Meinke tweet about Stephen Tulloch, former linebacker for the Lions, stomping on the Quinn Tricia grave. This was from November of this past year. Former Lions linebacker Stephen Tulloch on the firing of Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, quote, "The best news I've heard all year. The city of Detroit and its fans deserve so much better," end quote. So that's one example. I could have pulled 20. Eric Ebron, Darius Slay, A'Shawn Robinson, who Justin Rogers said, by the way, was like the worst player he's ever covered, but neither here nor there. They were stomping on the grave. I would argue they have to do significant reparative work with they hire. Do you agree that that's a strong consideration where you almost have to go with a guy that players just love, and even maybe more so than schematics for this hire? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, more or less. I don't like dealing in absolutes in the NFL, but that is the trend that you see, and I think there's a reason for it. You always see this reversion. I always call it like the ex-girlfriend effect. Like imagine you dated a girl for 2 years, right? And you break up, and you really hated a particular thing about her or her personality. The next girl, it's probably gonna be a total opposite, right? And that happens in the NFL every time, and you've seen it with the Lions. I started covering the team in 2013. Jim Schwartz, that was the final year of Jim Schwartz, and he was a fiery guy. I use the word combustible a lot. Like, you just never really knew what you're going to get day from day, besides high energy, and sometimes it was up and sometimes it was down. And he was a little uneven with how he dealt with different players. I think he picked favorites with star players, and that was a problem. And Jim Caldwell was the opposite. He was the most even guy I've ever met in my whole life. Extremely consistent. The meme you've seen going around with the many faces of Jim Caldwell, and it's all the same face. It's the truest thing I've ever seen on the internet. And honestly, being at dinner and watching a colleague show Jim Caldwell that meme to himself, to Jim Caldwell,
They showed it to
at
him?
dinner. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen. The thing people don't understand about Jim Caldwell, just to go on a really quick tangent, he is one of the funniest guys in the league. I mean, like, he is a funny guy. He just doesn't show that, like, publicly, you know. He's a pretty buttoned up guy and everything, but like, yeah, I always got a kick out of him when we had stuff. But
You can color me surprised because I wouldn't have guessed that. He seems as like vanilla and plain. And
I would love
dull.
to say more, but it was like, you know, it's off the record and stuff. So
No,
I'm not
I get
trying
it.
to
That's
be,
fine. That's fine.
But like, so you got Jim Caldwell's a consistent guy, a great CEO, coach's player, right? Like, guys love playing for him. Just not quite the X's and O's that you wanted. In-game problems. Like, I think he was behind the times with analytics. So he gets fired, and you go to Matt Patricia, who's the X's and O's rocket scientist, like, and also a fiery guy to some detriment, I think. And so you see this all the time. And now, you know, bringing us to now. I mean, the locker room is in better shape now because the guys love Darrell Bevell, and I think that they picked Darrell Bevell to be the interim coach because they knew that players liked playing for him. Matthew Stafford loved playing for him. Matthew Stafford had a bad relationship with Matt Patricia in 2018. Bad.
Who didn't though? I mean,
Exactly. No doubt. But when you have a bad relationship with the franchise quarterback and the most important guy to winning football games, that's a problem. And it got better over time between Stafford and Patricia. And one of the biggest reasons it got better was because Bevell came in 2019, and Stafford actually liked playing for him. He didn't like playing for Patricia in 2018. I feel comfortable reporting that. And again, like you just said, no guy did. So I'm not like breaking any news.
It is. You're right, though. It's particularly important to Stafford versus the backup safety or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And Bevell comes in, and Bevell is a good-natured, high-energy guy. The guy you saw in press conferences is the guy you get in meeting rooms and practices. Just a guy you like, a guy who treats the lowest level staffers in the building with respect. You know, I can't tell you the number of stories that I heard after Bevell was promoted in the first week or two, and guys like just telling me amazing stories about things about Darrell Bevell, like before he was even interim head coach, that he'd ask them about how their day was or what was going on or what their thoughts were about how things were going in the building or whatever. I mean, he made people feel important, and that's the opposite of Matt Patricia, you know, and I think that's a big reason why he was picked, because everyone in the organization knew the problems that existed beyond losing. It was culture. It was the energy and spirit of the team. I mean, guys were just obviously sick of losing. That more than anything beats the team down. But when you make practices hard and meetings long and angry and condescending, it just wears guys down. And Bob Bevell is the opposite. And I think you're going to find in the next hire a guy who's more from the Darrell Bevell cloth. I don't think it'll be Darrell Bevell, but I think he's more of a legitimate candidate for this job than people think, to be honest with you, because he has the respect of that locker room, which matters, I think. I don't think he's going to be the hire. I'm not here campaigning for Darrell Bevell, but I think he's cut more from the cloth of what they're looking for in these candidates going forward.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the cloth, but not the actual person, because you mentioned that you agreed with me. Marvin Lewis was 70-30 negative. I don't know anybody out there pushing for, like, you know, let's retain Bevell and just elevate him on a permanent basis. Maybe,
but again, they're not making this hire based on Sheila Ford Hamp, if anything else, has proven that she will make a decision irregardless of what the public perception and public perception of the Darrell Bevell. It would be bad. That might be the worst of all the candidates that I've seen linked to the job. But like, I think he could do a better job than most people believe. Again, I'm not here campaigning for Darrell. I did not walk into this room thinking I was going to be sitting here pounding the table for Darrell Bevell. But like, I think people need to give him a little bit more like respect for the job that he did.
I'm glad that he's nice to the interns in the office. That's wonderful.
Well, beyond that, though, he did a great job with the offense last year in 2019. It was bad in 2000
5 games.
It was for all 8 games that Stafford played.
Okay.
Stafford played the best. I'd say the best football.
I couldn't remember how many games Stafford actually played.
The first half of the season.
Yeah, okay.
And he played. I've covered the team since 2013. It was the best, most consistent, most efficient football that I've seen from Matthew Stafford. He was efficient. He avoided mistakes while testing defenses deep more often than ever. I mean, we could go through all the numbers, and we don't have to do that. It was a good first half. It was one of the best first halves of any quarterback in the league. Obviously, there was a regression from the offense this year. I do find it interesting that in the 4 games that Bevel coached down the stretch, Matthew Stafford had 4. In those 4 games, he had 4 of his 7 highest rated games of 2020. He was a top 3 quarterback according to PFF. I think he was number 2 according to Football Outsiders in terms of quarterbacks in the 4 games that Bevel coached. I find that interesting, and I have not gotten a good firm answer, Justin, on what Patricia was disallowing offensively, but I think the game plan changed and Stafford played better, and I think that should go on Darrell Bevel's record as well. I don't think he's the sexiest pick, I don't think he's the next great offensive or defensive mind in the league, but I think he got guys. He took over a team that was in a bad way. We all saw it. They got blown out 4 times in 5 weeks. They got shut out by the Carolina Panthers.
Not a good team. Starting
a XFL quarterback, and it was 20-0, and he threw 2 end zone touchdowns in that game. It could have been 34-0 for all we know, And Bevel takes it over after Thanksgiving, and they won 1 game, but they were competitive in all the games that he coached, and they played some good teams. They played the number 1 seed in the NFC. They played the Titans on the road. I mean, they were competitive, and it wasn't great and it wasn't pretty because they were missing half their team, and they had the worst defense in team history and one of the worst in NFL history. So I just think Bevel should get his due. I don't think he should get the job necessarily, but I don't think people should diminish what he did either.
Ben's on the other side of the wall, our producer. Ben, I want to make sure you pull this clip for after the show tonight that Kyle is on the record as advocating for Darrell Bevel, and he thinks Darrell Bevel is a slam dunk hire, and if they hire anybody but Darrell Bevel, he's going to quit and protest.
See, this is how rumors get started, my man. This is how rumors get started. I'm going to be the Darrell Bevel guy for forever.
The fan base will go crazy. And look, I agreed with you, 20 minutes ago about, I love that Sheila Ford-Ham doesn't give 2 hoots and how about what the fan base says. That expires when you get into the Darrell Bevel being elevated on a permanent basis basket. Thank God you don't think that's going to happen because this organization is depressing enough as it is without you piling on with Darrell Bevel being a legitimate candidate for this job. Seriously, I will be running for the razor blades if that happens. That is an absolute travesty. Yeah, I will throw a parade for Marvin Lewis over Darrell Bevel. My God. Look, I like to be a windshield, not rear view mirror guy, but you were around an era that was a disaster, and you've talked about how it was a disaster. You've been probably the most critical in the legitimate media of the Lions, in my opinion. I think Burkett's more measured. You and Rodgers are a little bit more critical. I think you take the cake, and believe me, in this studio, that's a compliment. I want to talk.
I just write what I know, man. I talk to people, and I don't pretend to know the full picture. I try to. My whole job, seriously, what I do, I just try to talk to as many people as possible and try to get as full a picture possible as what's going on, and then just put it out there. And it's interesting because I remember in 2014 being criticized by some fans for being too positive, and it has happened subsequently over time, but especially that year. And I've been criticized a lot for being too negative, and I've had, believe me, coaches, including head coaches, have big issues with certain things that I'd written. And my biggest defense of what I've written is just, this is what guys are telling me. This is what I understand to be your reality. And if you disagree, tell me, and I'll write that too, and I'll put that into the picture as well. But ultimately, if you win football games, the narrative changes, and you're not winning football games. You're losing games at historical measures, historical levels, and that's negative. And so the stories are going to be negative, and that's just what I do.
And you said it. Too negative about the Lions?
Yeah.
Really? That's an argument that someone made with a straight face? Because if you are completely fair about the Lions as a journalist, you have no emotion. You call it exactly like you see it. You are an objective judge, umpire of the situation. You are going to be indicting them. And that's not any axe to grind. That's not any I'm a cynical asshole. That is them hanging themselves again and again and again. And they have been a joke my entire life. I don't know exactly how old you are, but I think we're similar ages. They've been a joke our entire lives. But I want to focus just a little bit. We're not doing the deep dive. 5 minutes or so. Bear with us, because I'm curious. This is a selfish indulgence. this Quinn Tricia era. Why didn't it work? Because I got to be accountable. My Twitter handle is Darko State News because I was the biggest Darko fan. I have a scarlet letter as my name. I'm a big believer in accountability.
I didn't know that. I'm glad you aired out
That's the origin of it. That is the Darko State News handle is because I was the biggest Darko defender. The guy was in Orlando putting up like 8-3 in garbage time. And I was still saying he was going to pop and be a superstar and be the second best player in that class. It was the biggest example of cognitive dissonance in the history of sports analysis.
Well, in that vein, you'll appreciate there's a day in quarantine, and believe me, we've all gone into dark holes in quarantine, right? Like just nothing to do, too much time on our hands with nothing to do. There was a day where I definitely YouTubed highlights of Darko Milicic or whatever, and that was a dark day in quarantine for me, I'll tell you.
Yeah, things must have been really bad. I hope you had good whiskey that day. But the point is, look, I literally have built my entire social media identity on, look, I think I'm a smart guy. I think I get things right more than the average Joe Blow at Mr. Joe's Bar in Southfield. But as brilliant as I may be, I was so stupid on my hottest, sharpest, strongest take in history. And we've talked a little bit on this program about Jim Harbaugh. I thought Jim Harbaugh was going to win 3 national titles at Michigan. So, look, Matt Patricia's in my basket, not to the level that Darko and Harbaugh were, but he's in my basket of guys that I liked. I thought it made sense. I thought it would work. You mentioned earlier, fan base was damn near unanimous. My social circle was unanimous. The buzz I saw online was unanimous. I'm sure there were some deviations and there's some exceptions, some outliers. But it seemed like the right thing to do. I hated the Jim Caldwell hire. I knew he would never win jack shit. That was in hindsight. This was hindsight. Why didn't it work? Why were we all wrong?
Yeah, I mean, that could be its own 3-hour show right there, right?
Give me the 5-minute, the Diet Coke caffeine-free version.
Yeah, I'll give you, the 5-minute version to me is, it's not that they didn't know football, right? I mean, Matt Patricia knows football. I know people will disagree with me based on the way things played out.
Anyone at that level knows.
Sure. And he was Bill Belichick put him in charge of his own defense. So obviously he knows some things. I know that Bob Quinn knows football, and he had some more successes early in his career in Detroit. I don't think X's and O's and knowing football was their issue. I think we just went through all of the problems in the locker room and the clashes there, and of course that affects the day to day. Where players are at in their headspace, even their bodies, if they're getting worn out in training camp, which I think was an issue, especially in 2018. But it went beyond that. They drove away some of their best players with these personality clashes. Darius Slay's a great example, Quandre Diggs and so forth. But by developing a reputation for being people who are tough to play for and would drive away the best players if they weren't personality fits, they also kept away good players, And I think it's interesting that, the last 2 free agency cycles, I mean, early on, Bob Quinn was able to sign guys like Marvin Jones, for example, a really good signing. But the last 2 years, if you look at those signings, it was a lot of former Patriots and just trash. I mean, it was. I mean, like the best offensive lineman you could go find last year was a backup from Philadelphia, and I know that Vitae was never really fully right. I think all year health wise, and so that's a mark.
He was benched for performance at least once, though. I don't care.
Yeah, but he had the foot injury in week 1, and he's a big fella. I think he was battling that and some other issues. I'm not here to defend Vitae either. I'm not. Here for that. I'm just saying that when you put yourself in a box where you are tough to play for, you have personality clashes on the field, you are calling a star player on your team the C word, effing C word, on the practice field in front of the whole team.
What was it? Was it cocksucker, cunt? Was it one of those?
It was
the second one.
It was the second one. I don't like saying it. I think it's disrespectful. It's like the one. It's like the
quoting the guy.
It's like the holy grail of curses for me.
Teach about World War II. It doesn't mean I did anything. Yeah.
I'm not admonishing you. I'm just saying that's not a word that I use, especially in public. But that he was called a player, star player, leader of this team was called an effing C word. in front of the team.
Darius Slay.
No, it was a different star player.
Really? Wasn't it Slay? Was it?
No, Slay was a different issue.
Slay was the don't suck his dick or whatever.
Yeah.
that was.
So what happened with Slay was it was the joint practices with the Giants in 2018. Slay from the moment he walked in 2013, when he didn't know shit about how to play football, athletic as hell, but didn't know anything about how to play the game. He walked in, just wanting to play the best every single rep. And I've always respected that about him. And even as he got good, it was always the same way. So you can be damn sure he went into those joint practices marking Odell Beckham. Like that's right. That's what he got up for, I saw it the year before when they went to, or 2 years before when they went to Pittsburgh for joint practices. He wanted Antonio Brown every single play. There's like 5,000 people in the stands, and he wanted Antonio Brown every play. I watched him get beat like twice in a row, and he like jumped into the line so he could be on Antonio Brown the very next play.
It's a great thing.
Yeah. And it speaks to his football character. I mean, so that is to say, he was really eager to run against Odell Beckham in joint practice in 2018. They do that. I don't remember if it was day one or day two, but after one of those days of practice. After practice, but before the team meeting, Darius Slay posted a photo on Instagram, or maybe even a series of photos on Instagram of him guarding Odell Beckham. And they walk into the meeting, and the first slide on the team meeting is the Instagram post. And Patricia, just frankly tried to embarrass him in front of the team. And as you said, he said, stop sucking another man's dick, basically. But like embarrassing him for the social media post, Patricia had a whole hang up about social media in general. So it doesn't surprise me that this happened at all. He thought players were out too much and were way too much into likes on Instagram more than they were into film and all this kind of stuff.
He's not wrong, but it's like Tom Izzo. It's a losing battle.
He's not wrong. I don't think he's necessarily wrong, but this is the culture of the game. The
it's a
kids are
losing
22,
battle.
23, 24 years old. Like this is how it goes now, But there was more, Slay felt disrespected, and the relationship was never the same. Slay gets dealt a couple years later Slay made absurd contract demands. He knew the lines were never going to meet, and it was mostly because of Patricia and the damage that had been done years before. Quandre Diggs, Golden Tate, Glover Quinn, team leaders with strong personalities who were purged over time because Patricia couldn't get along with them. And again, you get the reputation on the league for having tough, long, absurdly difficult practices, even back-to-back, which players don't like because it doesn't give your body a chance to heal. Players feel back-to-back tough days like that, long days on the field, puts them at a greater risk for injury and stuff like that. The personality clashes. To me, Justin, this was the divide that Patricia created in the locker room over these like character issues and culture issues. That's why they lost in 2018, and it contributed to the losses thereafter. They put themselves in a hole going forward because they're having to get rid of some of their best players, and then putting themselves in a position where people don't want to sign here unless you give a former Patriot player $90 million, and then they'll come
Trey
there.
Flowers.
Right.
So,
that to me is the biggest reason why it didn't work.
And perfect segue into my theory on it, and I'm curious where you stand. All reports out there was stuff that I think it was like Bleacher Report about the popping champagne when he got fired and this and that. But my belief, if I had to guess, was if year one is handled differently, it could have been a better outcome for that regime. I think in all the reports, and maybe you can confirm or deny, that Patricia really made an effort to scale back, tone it down in years 2 and 3. But it was just too far gone. Do you think?
I agree with everything you just said.
You
just for
agree?
the record. Yeah. And I think it's important to say because it's part of the record too. Patricia was a disaster on every front in 2018, and as I just said, I think that's the reason why they lost in 19 and 20 because I think it made it more difficult to find good players.
Irreparable damage.
I thought so because there was guys in that locker room who were never going to forget what happened in 18, and then I think it also made it difficult to find good players in 19 and 20. But the flip side is. Patricia made mistakes in 18. I saw gains in 2019, and players did too. He was better with the media, but that's a tangential part of the job.
Did he show up on time in year 2?
He did.
That was his big thing. And Rodgers would be like, "Oh, we're 17 minutes late for the press."
Rodgers would. I wasn't. I thought it was Justin mostly because He said what everyone was thinking. I just didn't want to go there.
I thought it was both of you, but I remember vividly Rodgers being well, it's 10:17 for the 10 o'clock press conference. Waiting on Matt Patricia.
But the thing, again,
so embarrassing.
Another good point to make. The public gaffes, the gaffes with the media, get a ton of attention, right? Because it happens in front of the cameras. It ends up on PTI or whatever, which happened like I feel like 3 weeks in a row at one point. These minor gaffes. But like again, that's a tangential part of the job. He's there to win football games. But the problem is that he was showing up late for us, but he was doing the same things with the players. He was so hard on the players on the field. The players would show up for the meeting, the long meeting after practice. And Patricia would walk in 15, 20 minutes later, whatever. And then he would expect everyone to snap into like attention at the moment he walked in, and players took that as disrespect, So that to me was the greater issue was that he was late for team meetings and everything else, not just that he was late for, press conferences. It's weird
because you're supposed to be like the regimented, strict, like really it's, it's not even really like those ideas are conflicting. Like you're the, hard-nosed New England, like serious buttoned up guy, but you're late to meetings. I never understood that. Like even if you are the asshole's usually on time.
You're right. And that criticism is valid. And that's something that a lot of people would say that he was doing wrong in the job. And I think he was doing a lot of things wrong that first year.
What is he doing? Why is he late?
I think that he was, for lack of a better word, micromanaging. I think he had his hands in a lot of different things, was obsessed with things that a head coach should not be obsessed with. And I'm not going to get too specific because some of the stuff was said to me off the record, but he was obsessed with things that didn't matter. And like if those things stack up for head coach all day long, you're obsessing over things that don't matter, and then you have the things that do matter to deal with as well. And you're an NFL head coach. These guys have a crazy schedule as it is. I can understand how things would just stack up every day and you'd end up late for things. And I think that's what happened. But to get back to your prior point, to answer your question, I think he got better in 2019. He was on time for stuff. He was respectful. I think he was urged to be on time and respectful publicly.
Urged by who?
People above him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I was told, he was urged to put a better face out there for the Detroit Lions, and to be less confrontational, to be on time, to show more respect to the process, if you will. In 2020, he was even better. And I have to give Matt Patricia credit. I think it's important to do it because we kill him for the failures on the field, and they were innumerable. But he got better over time. And in 2020, I watched him field tough questions basically every day, especially after the first couple of games. Basically every day he was facing difficult questions, and down the stretch he was facing very difficult questions about his own legacy and future and things that matter a lot to him. His legacy and being an NFL head coach, it meant more to Matt Patricia than it meant a lot to him. And to know that he had to have known that he was going to lose it at some point, and to hear questions about it. And he still treated the process with professionalism and dignity. And so I think he did that well. Players that I talked to say that he conducted himself with, again, more professionalism and dignity, I think, in 2020. If Matt Patricia were to get hired for another job, I think he'd do a lot better job. I just think he was in a losing situation in Detroit after what happened early on. Coaches sometimes learn, and to bring this back to Marvin Lewis, maybe not a sexy hire, but I think coaches learn something when they go through that process and they have time to step away. I would love to see how second-time head coaches do in the NFL, their track record of success versus first-time head coaches. Bill Belichick obviously is the most famous example of a second-time coach, but just didn't work out for the Browns for a number of reasons, right? With a loser, and then he goes to the Browns, to the Patriots, and he's the best of all time. I'd be curious to see what would happen with Marvin Lewis second time around. I'd be curious to see what happened with Matt Patricia second time around. Well, I don't think Patricia's going to get the opportunity.
Probably not. But Marvin Lewis's first time around was not a disaster by any means, whereas Patricia's was. Look, I'm a conveyor belt of opinions, and in the garbage heap of bad ones, Patricia being a good coach in a home run hire is right in there. But at least I had a lot of company in that regard. And really, this is an organization that has a track record of a lot of ridiculous hires, and everyone talks about the ownership, and they're the one constant. My dad is a season ticket holder to the Lions, which means by default, so am I guess. I mean, he doesn't.
Oh my
nobody else
God.
wants to go, so it's like I'm usually his companion and have been my whole life. Look, we don't have to go through the entire sordid history of this absolute abomination of an organization, this embarrassment, this fraudulent team that is a shame on the city. But I do want to talk about your experience with them and the extent that you've been involved, and you have, in the grand scheme of things, a sliver of this team's history that you're associated with just professionally. But I have to imagine this team in particular is a brutal team to cover based on how inept they've been, the type of fan interactions you deal with. It has to be miserable covering them, right? Is that fair? I mean, I'm sure you like your job, but just the covering them has to be frustrating on principle, right?
Yeah, I love my job. First of all, before I say anything negative,
It's
I'll just put that out.
negative about M Live, but
no, I get paid, dude. I get paid to like travel around this country eating free food and like
it's all relative though.
And writing about football.
You'd rather cover the Packers, Kyle. I mean, come on.
So I wanted to preface that because I don't want it to look.
It's not shitting on M Live. I mean, most people would saw their arm off.
Shitting on M Live, shitting on just the job that I have as a beat writer of an NFL team. I feel grateful and I don't take that for granted. And so I just wanted to start with that. Before I
agree,
get into
and that's separate. But just covering them. I'm not saying you hate your job, but covering them has to be frustrating because they are so inept and, in my opinion, tone deaf. And that's, I won't speak for you, but attacking the media. We talked with Michael Stone a few weeks ago, and now they're back at 97.1. But their whole issue with Mike Valeni and their Bill Keenest, who's now the team librarian, but at the time was their media relations guy, calling up Mike Valeni during commercial breaks, demanding that he answer the phone, and they're an embarrassment of an organization. They always have been, and I get called the cynic, I get called the bad guy, I get called the Lions hater. Look, I still, with great shame, with great embarrassment, with no pride at all, declare myself a Lions fan, and I declare myself someone that wants nothing but the best. But your job, I can detach. I can say, you know what? They are so stupid. I can't take them anymore. I'm taking a month off. I'm Lions free for the month of June. This is your life. You're surrounded by this crap. You have to be. You can't detach. It's got to be frustrating some days, right? Dealing with this.
Yeah, no doubt. There are two things that come to mind. One is the cycle of negativity that comes out of a loss. Mondays have a certain feel to them, and I'm not even a fan. I don't have a rooting interest, and I still get exposed to the fan sentiment. If they lose, you're writing about the negative things, you're asking about the negative things. The players get down about it, the coaches get down about it. Maybe you get yelled at for dwelling on the negative, even though the negative is what there is to dwell on. Fans are angry because it's happening. If you don't write it quite the way they want, if there's a bad call in a 20-point loss, you're out with the loss, and you mention the blown call, but you don't feature it enough. You don't represent the anger toward the officials enough. I'm gonna get 10 emails, 15.
Oh yeah.
So there are weeks. I'm not kidding you. There are weeks where I don't open my email. And I'm sure I hope my bosses are not watching. Because that's probably not
your bosses
not
are
best
the
form.
only ones in Metro Detroit not watching the show right now.
Literally, my email inbox will be a nuclear wasteland.
And
after when things get bad. Yeah.
Those are my favorite tweets of yours are when you do like the screenshot of the emails that you get. It's so good.
I get some crazy ones, man. We all do. I don't think that's unique, but and the second thing is as a writer, I would like my writing and my work to be as relevant as possible. And covering an NFL team, you're always pretty relevant. And I'm very thankful for that. Covering a historical loser in the NFL, your exposure, your work's exposure is just not commensurate with the Packers writers, the Patriots writers, or these teams that go to the playoffs. Even the Browns right now. The Browns are about to play in a divisional game. My colleagues are writing good stuff that's getting national play. They're going on national radio shows, national TV shows. If they make a run to the Super Bowl, my colleagues are going to write books. Those are things that I would like to do. Those are things that are hard to do when you cover a historical loser, a team that loses no matter what it does eventually. But having said that, Justin, I've really appreciated. It's grown over time, and I didn't feel it at first, but now in 2020, having done this for eight seasons, getting a little old. I've really developed an appreciation for the like singular nature of Lions fandom. Like I just don't think there's a lot of fan bases quite like the Lions, where, as you just said, like you're pulling your hair out, you're angry, you're upset. It's a historical loser. It's a laughing stock. You always know they're going to lose, and you're still going to the games, and you still care, and you're still banging this goddamn
want
table.
The best for them. Yep.
And like, there's other fan bases like that too. It's not totally unique, but there's a lot of places like the Jacksonville Jaguars can win 5 games as the Lions just did, and they're going to have 5,000 people in those stands. And the Lions fans care, and I see that. And like I said before, the cycle of negativity is one of my least favorite parts about this job, especially on a Monday after they lost. Dude, you should see after a road game. You know, if you're wherever, if you're in Seattle, if you're in Phoenix, especially some of these places, and they lose on Sunday, you should be at the Detroit game on a Monday morning sometime and just see. Like, I want to write like a story sometime about just the scene at the Detroit game, the Detroit gate after a loss on Monday morning after an away game. It's sad, but these people care so much that they paid their hard-earned money to go to Phoenix or Seattle or wherever to follow a team that they know is going to break their heart eventually. Like it's a kind of an amazing thing, and I think because of like this endless 6-decade cycle of losing, like you get this gallows humor, and I've seen it from you like 10 times tonight already, like making fun of yourself for how much you care. But at the end of the day, you still care, and all you can do, right? All you can do is make jokes about it.
Want to.
And I'm endlessly like fascinated by that too. And I'll just wrap up this little like soliloquy with this. Like, I'm asked all the time when I do have opportunities to go on like national radio when people do care about the Lions, or when I'm talking to colleagues at the Super Bowl or the Combine, national kind of situations. There is this perception that because the Lions always lose, that fans don't care. Because again, that's what happens elsewhere, particularly in the NFL. If you are 2-10 down the stretch, people bail.
Ghost town.
People bail. And people assume that's the case in Detroit. And man, is it not the case, as you know, as everyone watching this thing who follows the Lions knows. And when they do eventually win, which will eventually happen in the span of time, like I want to be around Detroit when it happens just to see the scene, even if I'm not coming. The top in this town will come off. They celebrate even the smallest victories, and I can't even imagine what it's going to look like when they make it to an NFC Championship game, or God forbid, beyond that, people care, and I love that about. I write to a fan base that really cares, and I've always appreciated that.
I've seen fervor for the Tigers, although they didn't get it done, but World Series fervor twice over. I've seen Pistons title fervor once. I have seen Red Wings title fervor in the city 4 times. Nothing would compare to what I project the Lions to be. It would be the parade would start in Grand Rapids near our friend Tara Stafford out there and just continue all the way to Windsor. I mean, it would be unprecedented. And look, your official job title is beat writer. You're the beat writer. But you have recently, and correct me if I'm wrong, but recently you've had multiple submissions that have the little qualifier at the top. This is an opinion piece by the writer. This is not the beat. Look, from my perspective, you've been killing this team lately. And I don't know if the quarantine's getting to you, or if Justin Rogers said something mean to you. You've always been critical, but more, maybe a little more measured. Not Dave Burkett measured, but a little more measured. You've just been killing them. I'm curious, just generally, I know you haven't followed it, obviously, because you're crushing them left and right, but have you ever felt pressured by the team? Have they ever attempted to apply pressure to you not to say something or to take your reporting in a different direction?
Yeah. And I'm just going to leave it at that because all those conversations are off the record.
Off the record, you're taking them harassing you about the nature of your coverage off the record? Why respect that? Hey, off
because
the
it's
record,
a professional courtesy, and
Oh,
I
my
care
God.
about having sources, and so people are not going to talk to me if they don't think
Oh.
they can talk to me in confidence.
Hey, off the
So-
record, be nicer about the team. How's that?
No,
even
it's
off
not
the-
that simplistic. It's
Come on, man.
yeah. I mean, I believe me. I dig in and I have my disagreements. I'm not disagreeing with you.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, you asked me
does-
a question. Do they come to me? And I'm saying, yes, they have, including, and I'm not just talking about PR people. I'm talking about people who are football side.
Okay.
But I'm just going to, I'm not, those conversations are private and it doesn't behoove me to air out
You
someone
don't even
else's.
have to name names, but can we talk? Can we go on like the crust of the pizza here? Like, can you give an example, not with a name, but of like, hey, they didn't like somebody in the organization didn't like the time that I said Jim Caldwell, the dope, should have gone for it on 4th and 1 instead of punting against Dallas in 2014 or technically 2015. Like, there's not, look, I'm not gonna twist your arm. It's your right.
I'll just say this: Jim Caldwell in his in his 4 years coaching that team never once criticized me or the nature of my work.
Did anyone ever criticize your posture? Like poor Mike Ross.
Not to my face. Not to my
Does
face.
he actually have bad posture? He is like 6'8". I don't know. Maybe he does. I've never analyzed.
I'm not gonna comment on a colleague's posture, but I will say, so the disclaimer, I just want to say the disclaimer that you see on the tops of the columns, that's every news publication handles columns versus news stories differently. And to be honest with you, I don't even like how we do it. I just follow orders.
But it's
it's above my
though.
pen.
That's a standard qualifier.
Well, some places, other places in Detroit, for example, they'll have in the headline column, : or I think at the Free Press, for example, if my colleague Dave Burkett writes a column piece, it might say Burkett, : or Seidel. For Jeff Seidel, :
fair. That's fair.
we don't do that at Live. I kind of wish we did, but we don't. That's just our style, if you will, across, it's a big company, multiple cities. And so I'm just a peon in the whole thing, and I just follow orders. And so the thing that they want me to do is to show people this is an opinion piece from a reporter as opposed to straight facts. We want the disclaimer at the top, so I put it there. But I've written the same column every year I've covered the team since 13.
But short answer, you have felt pressured, but you can't talk about it. And that's fine. But the point is, if the takeaway for the audience, the many thousands of people that are watching this program with great glee, is that, yes, they have applied pressure to you. And that's the same story that I've heard from Justin Rogers, that I've heard from, can't say his name, off the record, somebody at 97.1.
Now he goes off the record. All right.
Yeah, but I'm not completely hiding the ball. I'm telling you, I'm giving you multiple examples that are on the record. Mike Stone couldn't be more on the record than on the show. Was talking about this being. I'm not against off the record, but I mean, come on. Your off the record was yes. Next question. I mean, come on. You got to give me a little more than that. We have an insane.
And I did. And
you did. Well, I had to drag
I'm just
it
saying,
out of you.
because I can't answer the specifics that you want. You want me to dangle some fruit in front of you and tell you which
Fruit's good.
and to tell you which coaches were bitching to me
That would be
about
great.
coverage. And I could tell you names, and it's not respectful to them or the process. Like, this is not how
What about my
business
audience?
works.
What about respectful to
I
them?
love you all.
They're extremely curious about this. Look,
audience,
the
but
one-
I can't. It doesn't.
I get it. I respect it, Kyle. I just, the allegiance to my audience more than the Lions coaches that you don't want to hurt their feelings. Look, which I get. I respect your position. But talking about what a joke they are, we talked very briefly pre-show. I think it's safe to say you and I are aligned on this. And this is something that I feel like every 4 to 6, maybe 8 months it comes up, this Calvin Johnson thing. My opinion, for my money, I'm not an old timer, early 30s here, but probably the second best player to ever play here behind Barry Sanders, Calvin Johnson.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I mean, I'm not going to get into Sims. I don't know who they are. Bobby Lane. I mean, I'm sure they were great. I heard Bobby Lane could drink anyone under the table. I'm not going to comment on Bobby Lane, but in the modern era, the second best player to ever play here, one of the best receivers to ever play the game. Had he played longer, which he was certainly capable of, would have gone down safely as one of the best receivers to ever do it. This organization, in the ultimate show of pettiness, something that they did to the aforementioned Barry Sanders as well, where they're suing Barry Sanders trying to collect his signing bonus back when he retired via fax in London. I'm going to bring up a couple of your tweets. Ben will throw them up there for the viewing audience, and we'll read them. I agree with you on this. This is for you on January 5th, and this is what I talk about. Your ass has been chapped lately, and it's just fantastic. I think it's great because I feel like I can relate to you more than ever. Quote from you on January 5th, Calvin Johnson has become a finalist for the Hall of Fame. Now give the man his money back. And then you follow up with another tweet about Calvin Johnson, which, of course, our screen just goes dark. But so you go on a back-to-back tweet session about Calvin Johnson where you're saying, look, it's a joke that they haven't paid him, that they're trying to collect his money back from him. I mean, I think it's the ultimate sign of pettiness of this organization that their two best players, again, I'm not getting into Bobby Lane, their two best players, Calvin Johnson and Barry Sanders, in whatever order you want to shuffle them, have both been, I know Barry's friendly now with them, but have both been attacked on the business side and had the forensic accountants for the Lions going after them. I think it's embarrassing. I think the optics are horrible. What does it say about the Lions that they do this stuff? Obviously, you think it's stupid. You put it out there. What does it say about them?
Yeah, I just think I'm almost in a professional sense insulted by the dumbness of this whole debate. But I'm not even sticking to Barry because I wasn't around for that. I know obviously the facts of what happened. I just didn't cover it. I was there for Calvin when he retired. Just a quick tangent. Like, I'm sitting in a cafe. It's I suppose March or something, and I see on my Twitter, I forget who reported it, but somebody reported Calvin Johnson officially retiring. Huge news, right? Monster news in Detroit. And I just start pounding away. And I'm telling you, like, not even 30 seconds later, like, I see like a commotion in my periphery. I look up, and Hillary Clinton is standing in my like cafe in Detroit, like this was 2015 during the campaign, like 2016 during the campaign. Just a weird confluence of like two events for me. But anyway, so I remember I was there covering the Calvin thing, and I'm like I said, I'm in a professional sense, I'm almost insulted that we're even sitting here talking about $1 million. Calvin Johnson made, I don't know, $200 million or something like that on the field. The Lions are a $1 billion organization owned by billionaires, and we're sitting here talking about $1 million. Like, it's just a dumb business decision. So the Lions were within their right to ask for the money that they asked for, and I think that's an important point to make. I think it's also an important point to make that, like, throughout the NFL, teams let that kind of thing go a lot of the time. I forget what Andrew Luck was allowed to keep in his signing bonus when he walked away, but it was like 6 times more than Calvin, 7 times more.
They famously
I forget
did
what
not
it was,
go after him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and you see that all the time with legendary players, the cornerstone kind of players. If a guy comes through for 2 years in a town and then decides to walk away, I totally understand it. But when a guy like Calvin Johnson is in Detroit for 9 or 10 years, he was drafted in 2017. He played as a rookie. The following year, he loses all 16 games. He was there for some of the darkest times that any NFL team has ever seen. He was, for a time, the only reason to come to Ford Field. Like, what other reason was there to go to Ford Field in 2008? There was none. Like, roster-wise, like personnel-wise, record-wise, obviously, competitive-wise, obviously, like, there was no reason to go there besides to watch one of the greatest of all time catch a football. 2009, you had the hope of Matthew Stafford. He played, I forget how many games he played that year, but they won 2 games. Year after that, I think Stafford played 2 or 3 games in 2010. Again, it was before my time, so I don't know the numbers. But, like, in those years, Calvin was the only reason to go to Ford Field. He was the jersey you saw in 9 out of 10 fans. Even now, 5 years after his retirement, you see it's probably more Calvin jerseys than anyone still, like 5 years after his retirement. This team made untold millions of dollars off of this guy. This guy, in return, gave the health of his brain to the team. He gave the health of his knees to the team. In his last year, he was getting knee drains every single week to be on that field. You mentioned before he had more football in him. I think he had more football in him. I don't think he had any more Calvin football in him. And I think he knew that. I think that was part of the reason he walked away too. The maintenance he had to do to be on the field was incredible. The last year that I saw him play in 2015, he just took a lot of square shots. And it was interesting to see because Golden Tate, the last 2 years he played with Golden Tate. And it was interesting to see the juxtaposition of the way they played the game. You know, they're both very productive receivers. But Golden, you know, he's a shifty guy. Like, it's hard to get a square hit
Never
on Golden
gets
Tate.
blown up.
Right.
Yeah.
Very rarely. Right. Exactly. And Kelvin, because he's so damn big, you know, and he goes up for the football or whatever. He just, and of course he's taking more attention from the defense. He's getting bracket coverage and all kinds of stuff. So there's always an extra guy around to hit him right in the freaking legs every time he caught the football. Like, so it makes sense to me that like his body was breaking down. And he gave all of that to the team and more and made them untold millions and was the face of the franchise. And he did everything that any team, any organization could ever ask for of an employee. The way that he was in the locker room, he was the first guy in the film room. He was teaching Corey Fuller, who was never really going to amount to anything, teaching him the finer points of like how to watch film, like doing even the smallest things that you'd expect, that you'd want from a guy, even though he was the biggest of stars. And that's a big reason why you see Calvin Johnson. He's a star. I've never seen that before or since in Detroit. There are stars, and then there are like the stars who the stars want to be. And Calvin was the star's star. And when he had to walk away because of the losing and because of the physical toll, they asked for $1 million back. That to a billionaire, that's like 10 cents.
It's humiliating.
It's a rounding error, and I think that's a little bit of a cliche now, but it's true in this sense. In the operations of this team, it's a rounding error, and they came after a legend for a rounding error, and it's like that to me is the biggest. That's why we're talking about it. We're talking about 5 years later because it's the Lions did something so petty and cheap, and look at them now, right, Justin? They are coming off of 3 straight last place finishes. They just had 2 of the 3 worst defenses in team history. They allowed the second most points in the history of the NFL. Only the 81 Baltimore Colts allowed more points than they did this year. They're headed toward another rebuild. Like, people are exhausted from this whole process. And Calvin Johnson's going into the Hall of Fame, or he's going to be a finalist anyway. I think
he's going.
If he's not first ballot, he'll be second ballot.
Yeah,
it's actually pretty close because of the depth of this class.
Right.
But he's right there. And either way, he'll be a finalist. He's a semifinalist right now. And this should be a moment of celebration for a team that badly needs a celebration. This should be, everything is going wrong right now. And this should be the thing that they're able to like publicize the hell out of and be able to have a little bit of like celebration and like give fans something to cheer about, their fans to cheer about. And instead we're here sitting and talking about $1 million, which is a lot to me, maybe not to you.
Oh,
it's a lot to me.
To me too.
I'm just playing. No, but it's just petty and it's cheap, and it's in a professional sense. It's insulting to me that we have to even talk about it 5 years later because it's so silly.
Well, it's bad on 2 levels. It's bad on principle, and it's also bad just strategically. I mean, I would argue even if you were a cold-hearted, penny-pinching bastard, it's still the wrong move because the goodwill that you could get from having Calvin Johnson Day and having him as an ambassador is easily worth $1 million, especially when compared to the negative. Like I said, every 4, 6, 8 months, he's running some free football camp in Livonia or wherever the fuck, and he's talking bad about the Lions. It's like, so you're not just getting the denial of the good publicity, but you're getting Kyle and Justin talking about how embarrassing this is 5 years after the fact, and it's $1 million. It's ridiculous. And
but honestly, like in terms of PR, like I don't even know how they calculate it, but you always see these calculations, especially from like the Rovels of the world, of like, you know, of like free ad time that, you know, when something goes viral or whatever. The Lions have cost themselves millions of dollars in publicity.
Loser. It's a financial
like they have
loser.
lost money on this decision to take away money from a legend. That's why it's so cheap and silly.
And they did it to Barry.
And I'm sure they regret it. I'm sure the people, I can't
regret it.
I'm
sure still make it right. I disagree.
I'm sure that they do.
Didn't make it right.
Yeah, I would love to ask that question. I need to ask that question to Rod Wood, to be honest with you.
Rod, good. Ask him a money question because that's the only thing he actually knows anything about. The fact that this accountant is sitting in on these football meetings is just egregious, but I digress. Look, you said it. They have the right to do it. By the letter of the law of the contract. But there's a clear distinction between the right to do something and the right thing to do. They're leaning on the former. We have the right to collect $1 million. It's an embarrassment. It's an indictment on the organization. And can we please, for the love of God, you said it. The one silver lining with this joke, this abysmal, fraudulent operation would be to have Calvin Johnson Day in the fall, God willing that COVID's tampered down and fans are there. But you have Calvin Johnson Day. He's in the Hall of Fame, and he shows up and waves to everybody at the 50-yard line at halftime. They can't even give us that. They can't even give us that over $1 million. It's an embarrassment. They're an embarrassing organization, and they always have been.
It's gonna be it's not even over yet either, because he could get elected into the Hall of Fame, and he's not even talking to the team.
He's gonna look. I'll make
and
a bet.
He's made it very clear.
He's gonna shit on them in some interview.
I don't think that he will. I don't think that he will.
I think you will,
because he's aired out his dirty laundry, but he hasn't said. He's been measured, I think. He's said his piece, but he's been measured in the way that he's done it.
And I think on them through omission. If you don't mention the Lions, if he's in the Hall of Fame and he's in Canton, he's giving the acceptance speech and doesn't even mention anything with Detroit, that is shitting on them through omission.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, the fact that we're even talking about it leading up to what should be a ceremonious event for a team that could use any kind of positive publicity, that's, to me, is the problem.
You're spot on. And you do a great job with this Lions coverage. And we're going to finish there with the Lions stuff. I want to look, I'd be remiss. Anytime I call anybody out on the show for anything and then they end up sitting in the chair you're in, I have to address it because it would be disingenuous.
Fire away, man.
I had your colleague, Justin. He's actually been in here twice, but Justin Rogers, great guy, respect him. We talked about this whole stick to sports thing with columnists. And he had a position which he explained in great detail on our show for our audience, completely opposite of you. His position is the exact position that I would take if someone had the insane idea to pay me to do what you do. I don't want to know what your political views are. I told Justin on the show, I said, look, I've been following you for years, Justin. I'm probably your biggest fan in Metro Detroit. I have no idea if you think Donald Trump is the greatest president that's ever lived or if you think he's a parasite that's going to take over the country and just ruin everything in the world. I have no idea. That's what I like. I follow you and many other people, but I follow you, just let's keep it to you, because I think your Lions coverage is fantastic. The thing that I don't like, that I think is irritating, is what I view as a constant, you might push back on that, railing against what I view as basically the entire embodiment of anything conservative, but Donald Trump in particular. You hate Trump. I was 0 for 2 in voting for him. I don't like Donald Trump. But I want to hear from you what's going on with Adrian Peterson. How's he look? Why is he here? Is Darrell Bevell a real candidate? You've gone the other way. Justin said, look, I don't think it's really my place. I keep it to myself. I talk with my family. You go the other way. I'm just curious. It's your platform. You can do whatever you want with it. I'm curious why you've made the conscious choice to sort of blend the two.
Yeah, and this might shock you, but we're all different in the field. We're not every sports writer is the same. And Justin and I are good friends. We have the frenemy, I think, public perception. And I love it. I love that guy, and I love our frenemy. The nature.
He's great. Justin's great.
But we are good friends. We are he's as good of a professional friend as I have in the business, more so than anyone at MLive or whatever. That's not even a site to anyone at MLive. I've just known Justin for a long time. We worked side by side for each other. We had some difficult, I would say, moments early on as coworkers, and we grew from that. And I was more so in the wrong probably early on. I've always appreciated the grace he handled that. And then we became friends while he was still at MLive, and then he took the job at the News, and we're even better friends now. And I have a lot of respect for that guy. And you're right, we handled this stick to sports issue, #stick to sports issue, differently, and that's fair too. I respect his position, and my position is different. And my position is that stick to sports is dead. You're gonna see more of what you're already seeing, because the intersection of sports and politics is here to stay, for lack of a better word, at least in the moment. I'm not projecting 100 years from now, but we're at a politically volatile moment where sports figures are protesting the government. You have the government protesting players, which, goes back and forth. And so you have, when you have players kneeling in front of you to protest police brutality, that's a story that That's
different, though. That's where they intersect. So if someone's kneeling in a football game, you're covering football. That's a defensible dipping into the pond. I'm talking about you talking about something that has nothing to do with football at all, that there's no intersection there. And we didn't pull a bunch of examles, but I don't think you would deny you've commented on Donald Trump things that have nothing to do with people kneeling on a football field.
What I just said was to lay the groundwork for sports are more political than ever, just like politics are more athletic or more sports based than ever. I mean, Trump has been obsessed with sports in one way or another. Just this week, as he's facing possible impeachment, he's trying to give the presidential medal of the Medal of Freedom to Bill Belichick. I mean, it's like the two are intertwined more than ever, which makes my job more political than ever, which is to lay the groundwork for me being more political than ever. And I honestly, I'm sure there are exceptions. I'm sure I have slipped at times, but I have really tried to operate with the personal philosophy of I have never tried to tweet anything or certainly say anything on MLive that was purely political. I defy you to find a single tweet about tax law or abortion or these truly political issues. In my estimation, personally, I think that everything or damn near everything that I've tweeted that would be considered political is not partisan. I think that you would struggle to find. I'm sure you would find exceptions, but I think you would struggle to find them.
I care more about body of work than individual exceptions.
Yeah, my body of work I think would show that I have that not a single thing I've tweeted has been partisan. I don't think like when somebody says grab women by the pussy without their consent and coming out against that is not a pro issue on either side of the aisle. Just like being against it is not on either side of the aisle.
Issue. Yeah.
Right. That's not like it's not pro-Democrat to be against pussy grabbing, just like it's not pro-Republican to be against pussy grabbing or whatever, if I just said that right. But you know what I'm saying? Like that's not a left or right issue. That's a right and wrong issue to me. So if I tweet that maybe the president of the United States or soon to be president of the United States shouldn't be saying something like grab women by the pussy without their consent, that to me is not a partisan issue. That should be a right or wrong issue. And those are the things that I've tried to focus on. In the last week, you've had not to get too much into politics, I guess, but you've had an assault on the Capitol building. I would call it a terrorist event where you had armed insurrectionists storm the Capitol with handcuffs and a noose, and they're chanting about hanging the vice president and trying to find the Speaker of the House, the Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker. Numbers 2 and 3 in the line of succession, if we're counting here. Like, that's a terrorist plot to me. 5 people are dead. One's a cop. There's another cop who committed suicide. You can see video of cops being squeezed in doorways to the point that they're spitting out blood. Coming out against this, to me, is not a left or right issue, just like being against it. I would not consider it to be a left or right issue. This to me is right and wrong. And when you have these people who are in this event chanting a guy's name, who are waving a guy's flag, who are repeating a guy's lies to the letter, trying to overthrow a process he's been talking about overthrowing for weeks, you can hold that guy accountable. And that to me is not a left or right issue. That to me is right and wrong. And so people might not like to hear it, and I get it. I really honestly do. But I have a very small platform in the greater scheme of things, very small, and I choose to use it in a way about things that matter to me. I'm a sports writer. I'm also an American.
Yes.
These things matter to me, Justin. These things matter. I'm not disillusioned. I'm not out here thinking I'm changing the world with my silly little tweets. I do not think that. But it's what feels right to me. A siege on the American Capitol to thwart an uncontested election is wrong. That thing is wrong to me, and standing up for that feels right. And that's what I choose to do.
And I respect that. The devil's advocate approach would be, yes, you do call out bad behavior, but it seems to be when it's Republicans or conservatives that you don't like. And there's Democrats that have done bad things, and that
I would 100% agree with you. The Democrats do bad things.
Yeah.
To me, I would defy you to find a single political tweet or whatever before the time of Donald Trump. I don't think it exists because I'm not. And get into this, I didn't get into this business to talk politics. Like, I'm right. But like, I also see fundamental issues with this, with the current administration. And again, I'm not out there talking about his politics, Trump's politics or whatever. I'm not trying to talk politics. I'm talking right and wrong. Like coming out against the siege on the American Capitol, to me is that's a right and wrong issue. That's not a left and right issue. Those are the issues I try to focus on. Republicans have been in control to this point. They've done the most harm. Trump has done the most objective harm. I'm not talking about his politics. I'm talking about the 29,000 lies that he's told and a bunch of other things that we don't have to get into. And so that's why I've focused on it. And I've gone out of my way to also praise Republicans when it feels like the right or wrong, like when they're doing right and wrong things. And just this week, I praised specifically Peter Meyer, the new Republican representative from West Michigan, where I'm from. He's been admirable in how he's handled things this week and his rhetoric. And again, we don't have to go down a political wormhole, but his rhetoric has been admirable, calling out the wrong for what it is and standing up for American ideals and American elections. And I have respect for Peter Meyer, and I've said so publicly, and I said so on my Twitter. And he's a Republican, and the whole Meyer family is Republican. It's again, I'm not trying to be political. I'm talking on my personal Twitter feed about what I personally believe to be right and wrong, and I've tried to focus on that.
Well, yeah, at the end of the day, it's your platform, and I say do whatever the hell you want. I mean, whether I like it or not doesn't really matter. I was curious for your perspective because I do see both sides. I get the perspective of, look, I'm an American, like Justin Spiro with his stupid Darko handle could comment on Trump. Like, why can't I? So, I mean, I get it. I get both sides, you know. So I respect that.
And if I may, just to say one other thing.
Yeah.
I understand people who don't like that, and I've been.
Which I don't like it. I'm telling you to your face, I don't like it. But it's also your right to do whatever you want.
Right, and I'm just. I don't expect everyone to like read my tweets and to like all of them or to believe all of them.
Just
or even to follow
about 92%.
me. And when people, and I've said a bunch of times to people who take great exception to my Twitter, who tweet at me as such, and I just say it's okay to unfollow me. I totally get it. I'm not for everyone. I'm not tweeting for everyone. I just
don't like that 6 to 8%. I think your stuff's great, but I would never unfollow you. You're a no-brainer follow on Twitter. You're one of the best ones on there. So anyway, let's lighten it up.
Yeah.
Speed round. We talked about it. You know the rules. Similar to word association, but not really. So we're gonna rip through them. Man, I feel bad. I kept you a long time, but this is our speed round. I'll go fast. So we'll start here. 1 to 5 sentences, whatever you want to do. Ford Field in general. Ford Field, just as a venue. What do you think of Ford Field?
Solid. Solid's a great word for it, Justin. There's way better. I love U.S. Bank in Minneapolis. That to me is the pantheon of it's a gold standard of NFL stadiums. I think Ford Field is solid, middle of the pack, especially for a stadium that's now going on almost 20 years old. I think it's aged pretty well. I think it's actually aged better than most stadiums from its era. I enjoy covering games there, and when they're good, it's a hell of an atmosphere, man.
It's a great stadium.
But they haven't been good lately, And the press box food, pretty hit and miss, I got to say.
Yeah, that was actually one of our speed round topics with Rogers. You should go watch that one back. So speaking of the Lions, we talked about it a little bit. Your personal experience covering Matt Patricia, your relationship with him, what was it like?
I think with everyone else, it was, rocky, especially early, and it got better over time. We had some disagreements. I'll leave it at that. We had some personal disagreements, and things got better after that. And I think that we had a good professional working relationship the last 2 years. You asked for the personal, and that's the personal.
That's perfect. Perfect answer. So you mentioned the stadium, U.S. Bank, but I'm curious more for the city. Your best city to visit on the beat. Nothing to do with the stadium or the team, but just you're out and about in the town for a day or two.
Can I go with London? I've only been there twice.
That's fine.
That's a pretty good.
Great city.
I can't remember if it was the first one or the second one. I don't know if I even should say this publicly, but I ended up out. Let's just say I got back to the hotel about I forget what local time would have been, but I got about an hour's worth of sleep. I will say before.
London's a great town. I've been to. Have you been to Paris?
I've been to Paris personally, obviously not for the NFL stuff.
Yeah, not for the NFL, but I love Paris is great, but I'm the only person I know that's been to both, and I actually kind of prefer London. I'm a weirdo, but London's a great city.
Yeah.
That's a good answer. That wasn't even on my radar, but yeah, it's kind of outside the box. It's perfect.
If you're looking for a good European city, I got to say, go to Berlin. Like
I've not been.
just push East and Europe in general. Honestly, two of my best vacations. So I know it's a speed round. I'm just gonna
No,
say this.
it's your speed round.
I spent a lot of time in Europe. I lived there for a year when I was a kid, when I was in college, and I love going back. I got friends there and stuff, so I go back quite a bit. And I've been around, and I'm telling, like, I know Rome and London. These places are the places people want to go. And I'm telling you, the further east I've gone, even into like Eastern Europe, like Croatia and like I went to Serbia and Bosnia the summer before Corona.
Did you see Darko when you were over there?
I did not see Darko. I did actually meet an agent for NBA players when I was in Croatia one time, though. And that was pretty wild. I forget who he said he repped. It was a name I hadn't heard at that time. But good times. Berlin, though, it's a class city, man. It's good times and cheap place. And I've spent a lot of my life there. And
I've heard nothing but good things about Berlin. It's everyone I've talked to that's been there just sings the praises of it. So, yeah, I got to check out Berlin. So we talked about it a little bit earlier. I want you to get it down to a number, though. You get a ton of emails. My personal favorite content of yours is when you do these tweet screenshots of the emails. We're throwing one up there. You just had this up the other day. This person says, please listen to me and respond if you have the balls. I don't know what was in the body of that. You did not include the...
That was my tweet?
This was you.
I don't remember that one.
This is a while ago.
Yeah,
It was like, not that long. It was like a few months ago, but we pulled this. So yeah, you had this tweet out a few months ago.
I do like how he capitalized balls. That's
he
nice
did,
touch.
which is interesting. It was like, he didn't capitalize his own name in the subject there, but yeah, you get these emails, and it's honestly like anyone that follows you knows, but once in a while you throw these out like, hey, Ron and Pontiac's pissed to like call you a fascist or whatever the fuck. And I have gotten that. Yeah. You get all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's my favorite content of yours, honestly, is what Ed Rogers has done it too, where it's like, oh man, I just crack up at how crazy these people are. Yeah. But you have a lot of these interactions. If you had to say like, what % of these emails or even just interactions in general that you have are rational? Like, how rational is the fan base? 20%, 80%?
Well, it depends on the forum. Twitter is kind of like, it's all over the map. It depends on the day.
In the aggregate, though, you put them all together in a pile. Lions Nation.
Like email, right? Like it's 80-20, like either it's 80% either like negative stuff or crazy stuff. Because that tends to be what fires people up enough to the point where you go find the author's email and then you open up your email inbox and then you fire off an email. Like that's a lot of steps, I think, for nowadays. And to hit up somebody, like it's easy to fire off a tweet. It's harder to fire off an email.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff that I get, and I think that's true for everyone, is either negative or crazy. But like in person, I get a lot of. I love talking to Lions fans. I mean, I love it. Y'all are a crazy breed, and you pay my paychecks, which is nice too. But the as we talked about before, Justin, the passion, I appreciate it because that's not normal. Like especially when teams are bad, that's not a normal thing. And I have been thinking a lot about how to explore that more deeply, either in my work or maybe in a deeper project. I don't know what the form would take. I'm not out here trying to like break some news on what I'm going to do, but I'm intrigued to a pretty great degree about the nature of Lions fandom. And I'll put it this way, like the Cubs, until they won the World Series a few years ago, were known as the lovable losers. Like they were known for it. They were a pop culture icon for being terrible, but people loving them anyway. And it's interesting that the Lions to me have become the Cubs, maybe not quite as like long period of time, but in effect the same thing where they just lose every single year. And yet they still have such a strong fan base, not national like the Cubs did, but locally, like it's the same effect. And yet it's a really like unexplored territory. I mean, people don't think about it in those terms. They just think, well, the Lions are terrible and their fans probably hate them. And the Lions fans hate the losing, but they still love their team in a way that Cubs fans did until they won the World Series. And I don't know. I appreciate that about Lions fans, and I would like to do something more on that at some point in some way.
It'd be interesting. That'd be a terrible challenge for me to read. It would just be depressing, but it would certainly be an interesting exploration. Yeah. The one thing I've heard the Cubs comparison before too. I always push back on that a little bit in that I think it's too flattering to the Lions because like the Cubs' reputation was they would blow it in the most heartbreaking fashion on the cusp of big things. The Lions don't even get to the doorstep of good things. They're never even close. I mean, the Cubs lose in a heartbreaking fashion in 1945 in the World Series. Obviously, in 2003, the horrific Steve Bartman incident in the NLCS, and they're up 3-2 in that series. Kerry Wood homers in Game 7. The next game, they have a lead in that game. They blow it. Like, the Lions don't even teach you to that regard. So you're flattering the Lions, but I get the gist of what you're
They've
saying.
never made a Super Bowl, but they've had some moments. They've had some brushes. They made it to a NFC championship game in 1991.
Yeah, who did they beat in the round before?
The Cowboys.
Yeah, who was the quarterback?
Oh, God. You're putting me on the spot now. Hold on. I don't even remember.
Troy Aikman.
It should have been Troy Aikman, but Troy Aikman was out. He wasn't playing that game.
Oh, was it Jason Garrett?
It was not Jason Garrett. The point is that Troy Aikman wasn't playing, and then they got destroyed by the Washington football team. I don't know, what do I call them for that from 1991? The point is, even everyone says, oh, they went to the NFC Championship game. They beat a team without their quarterback and then got boat raced. They were not on the verge of anything great. And even if you want to give them credit for that, I was still shitting my pants when that happened, and I'm not that young, so they're a joke. Sorry, we're done with them. Favorite player you have covered? Nothing to do with, Calvin Johnson was fun to watch. In the locker room, as a guy, the person, the dude. Favorite player you've covered?
I mean, like Graham Glasgow and I got along. We're kind of cut from similar
Michigan
cloths.
guy?
And I respected what he was about. He got to the NFL, and a lot of guys they buy the big house before they should, and even if they don't, they make some money in their second and third year. They get the big house, and Graham spent his rookie year. He lived with Taylor Decker and Joe Dahl in a house in Birmingham. It looked like a turtle, they told me. I don't think it was like your classic Birmingham house. I think it was kind of like a college house, kind of situation. I just can't imagine. It's like 1,000 pounds worth of human, and they were living in the same house, carpooling in Graham Glasgow's mother's Honda Pilot to work every day in Allen Park. Like, I just can't even imagine some of these visuals. And then after that year, they kind of did their own thing, and Graham went back to Ann Arbor, and he lived in a condo with his now wife and their dog, like basically in the shadow of the big house. I've been there. It's a nice condo. It's a modest condo. I could live in that condo on my sports writer's salary. And I just always kind of respected Graham for, like, just being a regular guy. And that's what he was. I mean, it's not like some guys like to sell themselves like that. That's how Graham Glasgow was. And I respected him as a human being, just being a regular dude, even though what he did, despite of what he did for a living, and then what he did for a living, he was not a flashy player, he was not your mauling guard, which I think actually hurt him with the evaluation with Bobby Quinn and Matt Patricia. But he did his damn job every day. I mean, I can't think of a more consistent player over the last couple of years that I covered Graham Glasgow. He played every snap until the atrocious guard rotation his last year. He was extremely consistent. Again, not a mauler. He's not Quentin Nelson. He's not going to pancake guys on SportsCenter.
Technically sound player, though. I liked him.
And not even technically. He did his job. There's a reason why he was graded so highly, and there's a reason why the Denver Broncos gave him $11 million a year. It's because I believe that's what he got, and it's because he plays football very well as a guard. And beyond that, like, he's good in the locker room, he's good in the film room, he's the same guy. And I will say this about Graham Glasgow to wrap. There's a lot of guys in that locker room that bitched about Matt Patricia and the way things were going. A lot of guys. And it was the leaks were happening before they even played their first game, if you remember. And Graham Glasgow and I were on a good relationship, and I never once ever heard him bitch about Matt Patricia. He did talk about some of the realities when I would press on it. Like, everyone is saying this, like, what's going on? And his response would always be something like, yeah, I mean, maybe, but like, I'm going to play for a coach no matter what. And I'm going to like some of them, and I'm not. And I'm just here to, like, do my job. And I always respected that about Graham Glasgow. I had respect for him on a lot of levels.
I've heard nothing but good things about him. You're like the third person that knew him that said he was a great guy. Someone at Michigan told me that too.
Never heard him shit talk anyone in that team, and I've heard a lot of shit talk.
And I don't begrudge those that do, but good for him for rising above it, I suppose.
Yeah.
And the yin to the yang of that question, and this is where we'll wrap and we'll finish here. The opposite side of the coin. The least favorite player you covered, not because they weren't technically sound, but because thank you for picking Eric Ebron in the graphic. That was a Ben Augusta editorial decision. But just the guy's just an ass, or was disrespectful, or had no time for you. I don't know what your experience was. The worst guy you ever covered, just as a guy.
Just for the record, I liked Eric Ebron. I think he had some serious issues, like as a teammate in person, which held him back. Held him back despite his immense physical talent and everything. But he outside of one of the training camps, I forget if it was his 3rd or 4th year, where he denied my interview request, I think like 20 straight days or 22 straight days or something like that. Outside of that, he always made time, like more or less.
Who are you to begrudge anyone for turning down interviews, Kyle? I mean, my goodness.
No, I'm just saying, like Eric Ebron was always interesting, if nothing else. And as someone who's supposed to be chronicling what's happening, I always appreciated that. And he would usually talk even when shit was hitting the fan. So,
not popular
serious,
in Detroit.
definitely. And from fan perspective, I totally understand why. You're asking me about my guy. He
didn't make you wait 2 years to do the interview like you made me wait though, Kyle.
Yeah, so. Something close to it though. At one point,
you play harder. You play harder to get than Ebron.
Ebron. I forget what he was salty about, but he was salty about something. So he literally, I walked up to him like every day, I swear, for like 3 weeks in a row in training camp, and he kept turning me down. And I'll never forget. I was talking to somebody else after training camp one day, and I just caught on my periphery. He was talking to some like no-name TV reporter. It's like there's beat writers who are there every single day, and then there are fringe people who come through every once in a while. And he was talking to a fringe person, and I swear he was doing it just to like make me mad.
Throw it in your face.
But
you love Eric Ebron. You think he's an all-time great first-ballot Hall of Famer. Who was just an ass though?
Well, I mean, it's not. You already mentioned it before, so it's not an original thing. But A'Shawn Robinson was not respectful. So whatever. I mean, I don't want to dance on any graves here. The guy's long gone. But he did not show respect for what my job was. It's our job as reporters to write about the touchdowns and the wins. It's also our job to write about the interceptions and the fumbles and the penalties and the losses. And when you cover the Lions, there's a lot of those things. And I can fully understand why a player would be upset, or even a coach, when that's what's getting written about. Like, how would you feel? If I was getting written about that way, like I would understand it on some level, but I would also hate the fact that my dirty laundry was getting aired out.
Human nature.
So it's human. Yep. Thank you. That's a good way to put it. It's human. I understand. Like, I'm not sitting on some throne here. I understand my place in the game, and some players will understand, and some players just won't. But then there are the Lions locker room is a good one generally, but everywhere has people who don't fit that mold. And to me, A'Shawn never showed respect for he didn't show respect for what we do, and was salty and told me to go fuck myself a couple times. So that's to answer your question.
Just the merger of an idea between you and Justin Rogers. It's like the Hutus and the Tutsis. Like, you guys agreed on A'Shawn Robinson being just the biggest ass that you've covered. So I'm glad that you found common ground.
Who did Justin like covering?
I can't remember, but I had to think that was in the speed round. I just remember him shitting on A'Shawn Robinson. But
he had some very nice words to say about Sue.
Yeah, he actually defended Sue. We'll talk about the Sue condom story after the air. So, man, that's a wrap for us. So you did a great job on that note.
It's quite the way to wrap.
Look, it's the great and powerful Oz is commenting, man. I mean, Ben.
I gotta get home. I got a bedtime. I got to cover a GM hire story. The next 48 hours.
We know they may have made a hire while you were in here, but hey, it's not my fault. You had a lot to say, which is a great thing. But look, man, this was a 2+ year courtship. Most people turned me down. You were just basically kind of ignoring the overtures, and then you finally got worn down. You were bribed with some fantastic whiskey. And look.
And it helped. I'm not going to lie.
I don't blame you. I don't begrudge you. But look, I know I'm a cynical guy. I, for a long time, wrote for a website that was toxic in town. So I am undoing the damage of that association.
See, I was unaware of this too. And so I tweeted. No, I truly was.
Yeah.
And I tweeted today about, I think I just retweeted your thing about coming on here.
Yeah.
And I had a couple people on my beat email me some things, and they made me a little concerned.
So this is a great. Yeah. Can we talk about this on the air, or is that off the record too?
Yeah, maybe off the air.
Okay. Yeah, that sucks for you guys, but it's great for me. All right, I can't wait for that one. That'll be good. And believe me, you're not the first person to say, "Hey, after the show's over, I'll tell you about all the people that told me not to come in." So this is not baptism for me. This is a rodeo round 6 or 7 in that regard. But hey, man. We had back-to-back shows this week. We had Max Boltman from The Athletic yesterday, Kyle Meinke from MLive. Just fantastic interview, man. You did a great job. Look, I hope I wasn't too big of an ass. I'd love to have you back. You do a great job. I have the utmost respect for your work. You and Rogers, man, are just killing it with the Lions coverage.
I appreciate that, and Dave does a great job. I feel thankful as a professional to be on that beat. I've only been on one other beat. I covered Michigan football for a couple of years before I did Lions. Also a good beat, but like I'm very thankful to be surrounded by good people. I mean, good humans. Like there's good humans top to bottom in that beat, and talented folks. I feel like no matter how well I do, I'm always playing catch up with a Dave Burkett tweet from 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And that guy's a machine. So I'm thankful. I appreciate the kind words, and I'm thankful to be here. And I'm to be here, also be on the Lions beat, and yeah.
You're welcome back anytime. I know that you're exhausted from your time storming the Capitol last Wednesday, so I appreciate that you recovered enough and you put down the lectern and got yourself ready for this interview tonight. So Spiro Avenue Show, Justin Spiro, thanks to our producer, Ben Augusta, the other side of the wall, the great and powerful Oz, as he's known around here. Again, thanks to Kyle from MLive. Just a fantastic finally getting through that wall. It was a great, almost 2 hours. You're a very generous guy with your time, Kyle.
To be honest, I didn't know what time it was. The clock's behind me. I assume that's probably on purpose, right? To put the clock behind the guest.
Yeah, I want to see it. I don't want you to see it. Yeah. But hey, you're long-winded, which is wonderful because the short answers. Well,
you sound like my editor now.
That's a compliment for me. I mean, for my purposes, it's great. So appreciate you guys checking us out, and very exciting stuff. The new solo show, Off the Curb, is debuting this weekend. So we are days away. So as much as you all love Kyle and Justin Rogers and Max Boltman and John Wharton and the conga line of great guests we've had, for those that are just huge fans of mine, and I know that's the vast majority of you tuning in, you get just me, and it's going to be a small dose of just me, but about 20 minutes of just me this weekend for the first time. Very exciting stuff. More national focus, so I'm not going to be whining too much about the Lions and Michigan State basketball flailing and blowing huge 17-point second-half leads. Has been the Spiro Avenue Show, Justin Spiro. Again, thanks to Ben, thanks to Eric Williamson and his boxers on his couch tuning in, our great graphic design guy, and Kyle Meinke from MLive. You were the man. Appreciate it.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Justin Spiro, we'll see you later this week. Thanks.